Well, thank you so much for the invitation to present to the Theosophical Society on a very important topic, how to reduce tech stress. And out of that really is how can we optimize health while engaging in technology and social media. If anyone has any questions or want to read more about this, then I would say I do a blog called pepperperspective.com. That's pepperperspective.com that has many of the scientific articles and descriptions based upon this presentation or from this presentation or in our book, Tech Stress. And the real point I want to point out is what is tech stress? What are the symptoms? And what you can do about it so you can optimize your health. That's the critical part. And all of us know, especially our children, our grandchildren, ourselves, we end up being prisoners of our cell phones and digital media. And so often when we do that, all we do is we look down, our attention span is shortened, we tend to shallow breathe and have immobility. I'll make those points more in detail. You can just look around. Here we are. Whether it's at a coffee shop, we're sitting and look how we're bent over, or whether we are waiting for public transportation, we're looking like this, or sitting outside at a campus. And now when I teach a class at San Francisco State and the first day I walk into class, almost every time, even if there's 60 people there, instead of talking to each other, hello, hello, hello. In fact, what they're doing is they're looking down on their phones and they're becoming socially isolated to a certain extent. We have the delusion that that connection with the phone is nurturing. It is to a certain extent. It's great to connect with lost friends, relatives, keep updated. But something is missing, and that is that human connection. And we know when we study people who live till ripe old age, who are more happy and healthy, what they have is community and social connections. And these cell phones and the sitting in front of the screen just by yourself may be limiting that. You can see, here we sit. And notice we can sit crookedly. We even don't have time to go to the bathroom when we're working, or on our holidays, we sit and look at the cell phone versus looking outside at nature where we can really regenerate. Okay. And we spend on the average more than 7 hours a day in front of screens, many even much more. At work, it's 8 hours or 9 hours. And then we come home and we collapse on our couch in a slouch. And we just look blurry-eyed at the screens, at the streaming videos. And it's shocking. And remember, adolescents and college students interact with media for more than 40 hours per week, more than 6 hours per day. And if you ask the students in the first day of class, how do you feel? 54% already report they're tired and dreading the day when they wake up. This is a time when we want to be energized. But I want to point out here, I'm giving this presentation on Zoom and on a screen. You're watching on a screen. So do something different. Because what happens with students is when they watch lectures on a screen, they just sit there. They may then be texting to somebody else. They may be talking to their roommates. In a way, they're continually being distracted from and often not totally present. When we did the most interesting study is we asked students to act as if the person presenting is in their presence. And if I were in your actual presence, you wouldn't be sitting back. You would be nodding and saying, yes, Erik, or Dr. Pepper, or whatever you would call me. No, I disagree with that part. You would make eye contact. You would look, you would body posture. You communicate with your body and soma and your facial expressions that you're interactive. So we asked students to do something like that. We asked students to do something very similarly. Namely, first attend a lecture, a presentation, your normal way. Then rate your energy level, your concentration, etc. And the next time you go to that similar class, act as if You're in person with that video. So when you agree with what the person is saying, nod your head. If you disagree, no, or even speak out loud in a response. The outcomes are remarkable. The results are most dramatic when students become animated and are responding to the video as if it's a real person by nodding their head, by speaking out loud, by moving or whatever. They report their energy level is higher. It means they became less sleepy. Their attention was more captured. They were able to learn more. They felt much more involved in the material. And that's true for about 3/4 of the students. For the other, 1/4, they reported no difference. And they were also different. When we explored that, those are the students who already came to class and they were really ready. I want to learn. I'm totally present, even if they sat quietly. So for them to do this additional animation was work. But in most cases, really next time you watch a video, especially when it's maybe more boring, like class lectures or anything else where you want to learn, really be animated. As one of the students pointed out, during the normal class, I felt disconnected due to boredom and wandering attention. It was hard to focus since I live with two of my best friends. So I'm usually having side conversations with them. I was also multitasking, texting on my phone and working on some assignments. Well, when they were being animated, simulated animation, putting their body into a learning mode, you could say, I felt energized after this class because I was so involved. I was not distracted at all because it was a class that kept me engaged. One thing that's obvious, that I learned more in the class where I was animated. I thoroughly enjoyed the class. Remember, it's the same topic of the class. So it's the person changing their perspective and way of listening. Remember, in normal conversations, we use our eyes, our body posture, the tonal quality, our body's expression, as I said, and many others. But let's now go back to our normal experiences working on computers or cell phones, which we use so extensively. So what do you experience? Just think back. What is it? And if you're like most of our respondents, at the end of watching the screen or working, you feel more fatigue. For a while, that has been called Zoom fatigue. We have eye irritation. Our eyes tend to be drier. And after looking at the screen, then when we go outside and look away, the world is more fuzzy. And part of the reason of that is that when we're looking at the screen, our eyes have to converge. The lens, muscles around the lens contract, and they stay in constant tension. And the only way the eyes can relax, if I can look outside, which I'm lucky I can do at my window, look at the far distance, preferably green. Now my eyes can relax. The eyes diverge. So one of the lessons from that is whenever you're working on screens, interrupt it, look outside, look far away to let the eyes relax. And I'll come back to that concept. We have neck and shoulder discomfort, the eye neck. We have back pain because our head is so far forward. As I said earlier, we tend to be tired and exhausted. We have a shortening of attention span. We have an increase in depression and anxiety. We obviously do much less movement. We develop sitting disease. And when you look at all the symptoms, here, this is from students: anxiety, neck and shoulder tension, abdominal discomforts, headaches, irritable bowel, menstrual cramps increased, habitual chest breathing, cold hands, etc. And or if you look at young people, these are European studies, you see the same thing. I'm not making 30% of young people already have musculoskeletal disorders. That's the time that you should be really feeling healthy. You want to do music, play sports, and young workers, it's 34%. Those are unbelievably high numbers. As you can see on this slide, how many of us work at home, we tend to slouch. And in this position, we're setting ourselves up for difficulty. Our head is forward, increasing the tension in neck and shoulders. We get neck pain. We get eye irritation as we look so closely at the screen. We may get headaches because our neck is contracted. We get back pain and many other symptoms. There's no way to resolve this issue with a laptop. The only way to resolve this is make the screen higher so I can sit up. That means the keyboard is too high for the hands. Thus, I need either an external keyboard, so the keyboard can be almost at my lap, so my body's in neutral position, or the screen, I use an external screen so I can look straight ahead. That's the ergonomics. Okay, and here you can see what happens when we bend forward our cell phone look. When we look down like this, look, our head weighs an equivalent of 60 pounds. We're not aware of it, but these muscles have to work and work and work, compress and compress our neck. No wonder we develop osteoporosis, we develop many disorders of the neck and pain, and then in our back, because as our head goes forward, our back has to compensate and we're in trouble. And now the worst part of this is for young people. Nearsightedness has become an epidemic. And part of that is because as a little child, as you see this child here looking at the screen, or a tablet in this case, it's looking at a very near surface. The eyes converge, and after a while, the eyes literally remodel themselves. So that becomes our focal plane. Now we only have looking at nearby objects in focus. And thus, nearsightedness has increased by 25% from the early 1970s to nearly 42% 30 years later. And if you go to places in Asia, such as Singapore, almost 80 to 90% of young people now have to wear glasses. And even during the pandemic, when we were more at home, only watching screens, in young children whose vision should be very good, myopia increased from 15% to 27%. And the correlation is the increase of screen time, 2.5 hours to nearly 7 hours a day. And a significant decrease from being outside from 90 minutes to less than 25 minutes. And that has continued as we are captured by the screens. And then the final segment, I want to talk about pathology. I don't want to do the whole talk so negatively, is the remarkable increase in mental and physical health decrease and deterioration. In pediatric mental health visits have increased by 70% from 2011 to 2020. Our suicide visits have increased fivefold. But let me show this in a different slide, which will really put into context. This is a difficult slide to see. It's very compacted. This looks at the mental health trends in the United States from 2008 to 2019. The reason I bring up this slide, because we tend to blame much of it on the pandemic and COVID. No, it isn't that. The trends were already occurring. COVID and the pandemic only escalated that, and it has not yet stopped. What this is looking at is the people who experience serious psychological distress in the past month. And if you look at the curve here, the top one are the people who are 18 to 23, starting in 2008 to 2018. Notice how it goes up. The group that's a little bit older, from ages 24 to 29, look how it goes up the same way. It goes up. You see the same trends for major depressive episodes. The young people go up, and the people less, from 24 to 29 go up. And at least suicide-related outcomes the same way. You see the young people are the worst from 18 to 23, and then followed by the 24 to 29. What is critical is this is data from pre-pandemic. It's really impact from the use of social media. And I think that's the critical issue. How can I say that? Yes, people were using more social media. That's true. We have Facebook, Instagram, TikTok now, and many others. But how can you say that causes it? Because at the same time, our food has changed. We're eating more ultra-refined foods, maybe more social stress. Parents have to work harder. Their kids, don't have time to be at home with their kids or whatever. There could be many factors. But we now can say that social media was a contributing factor. And that is called the Facebook effect. that is not causal, not synchronistic. How was this found out? When Facebook was first available for Harvard students in 2004, it was a remarkable phenomenon. And slowly thereafter, it was rolled out to many different colleges across the United States. Then researchers at MIT, Bulgaria, and others in 2022 said, gosh, I wonder if there's an effect. And what they did, they looked at the medical records at the university before Facebook occurred and after Facebook was available to the students. And now you can see two kinds of studies. One, comparing equivalent colleges where Facebook became available, and the other college where Facebook was not yet available. And then you could see also what happened once Facebook became available. So now you can see a causal relationship. And what they then found is that there's a 7% increase in severe depression and a 20% increase in anxiety disorders once people were captured by Facebook. And Facebook is just a name holder for now many of our social media, Instagram or whatever. And what is the reasons for younger people? We do unfavorable social comparisons. Everybody's looking good on Facebook or Instagram. They all have these great meals. And I only have the money to go to McDonald's or other places. In addition, there's been a massive reduction in attention span. On the average, when you are attending right now, we can attend for about 150 seconds in 2004 before a thought or we were distracted. Now the average is 44 seconds. Then we have an increase in arousal. Every time we react, we get activated. We get sleep disturbances. The last thing we do is we look at our cell phone, we look at our agenda, we look at our social media before going to sleep. And now we get the blue light going into our eyes that may keep us more awake. And more importantly, the content we're thinking about. Then the very important component of slouching, where we just slouch and slouch. And we don't really realize that in the act of slouching, and I'll point it out later, we're adopting almost a depressive posture, that the posture then changes our moods and thoughts, and our breathing is affected. So if you think of the C generation, what can you do to optimize your health? Let's start in the positive way, then we go back. One, it's critical to limit cell phone and screen time. And we cannot ask the child or the young adult to do that by themselves. Ideally, yes. However, we have no control because these are the screen, the rapid changes are addictive. They capture our attention. It's no different than going to the supermarket with a child. And there on the first, near the checkout counters, there's all this food, these sweets, and the child wants the candy. And then we ask the child to have control over the candy. That is not possible, really, because we are wired inside ourselves to want calories and sweetness, because we need that for survival, except now we have a plethora of it. The same way, the rapid changing signals on the screen capture our attention time and time again. And then we get something new. We get another dopamine response. Yes, great. And so we become addicted. So we need to limit screen time. And do this also in the family. So when you have dinner or family gatherings, do not have the cell phone near you. Put it to the side, out of vision. Do not keep it in your pocket where you'll continually be interrupted by the vibration. And when we ask our students, when they are with others, and the other person in the middle of their presence and conversation feels the cell phone vibrating, they usually pick it up, they look at it for a moment, and yet the other person with whom they're talking feels dismissed, feels less connected. They all report that, and yet so many of us do it. So as parents and social communities, we need to limit the use. We need to really go out and play and spend time in nature. And maybe China is right. I don't like many of their policies, but look what China has done now. In 2019, they limited the curfew of gaming. Children under 18 were banned to play at night. and only 90 minutes a day. They changed that in 2021 to only 3 hours a week. And just this year, they recommended that children less than 8 can only have 40 minutes a day on any digital device. Children 16 or less, 1 hour, and children less than 18 can have a maximum of 2 hours on their phone and no internet access from 10 o'clock at night to 6 a.m. You know, I do believe in freedom of choice, but there's maybe some wisdom here, and maybe parents may want to influence that more. However, it takes a community. Why do we experience all this? As I said earlier, the screens stimulate our adaptive survival response. And yet we are totally unaware that we are captured until the symptoms occur. Then you have the time pressure, the work stress, the lack of control, our immobility, and being on call 24/7. And then we have incorrect ergonomics and others. Keep in mind, we need to go back in a way to our more evolutionary background, where we came from. Look at the Habzabi men in Tanzania. Here they look how tall they are. They look upright. They're walking. And in their life, they alternate by looking at the far distance and nearby, while we only look at screens. Okay, so in a sense, you could say genetics may load the gun for illness, but how we live and behave pull the trigger, and how we now collapse is one of those triggers and not movement. Remember, we started on possibly from this perspective on the left, and then we end up on the right with a much bigger head, and our head is forward. We've all seen this picture, I'm sure, but I want to talk about a concept, and then I'll talk what we can do. That is called evolutionary ecological traps. The trap occurs when our adaptive behavior that once was successful becomes maladaptive and harmful. When this occurs, the cues that are protected or beneficial can lead to reduced health. Let me give us an example, not humans, but of albatrosses. Albatrosses breed on an island called Midway in the Pacific, in the center. It's thousands of miles away from its other nearest land. And when you go to the beach there and you look at the nests, you see thousands of skeletons like the one on the left here. What is left is the skeleton, the feathers, and the leftover plastic in their gastrointestinal tract. And what happened is that these birds would be flying over the Pacific. Previously, they saw something shimmering in the water, which probably was a little fish. They would then dive, and they would get it, eat it, swallow it, and sometimes they would fly back and regurgitate it to their chick. Now, however, they fly, they see something very similarly shimmering. They dive, they swallow it. It's now a piece of plastic, and the algae around it makes it taste okay. And so those birds that were most efficient at being able to fish in that sense, collect food, are now most efficient to eat the plastic. And thus they die. We may be doing something very similarly when we are watching screens. We're continually being triggered by the stimuli to be activated. We get sympathetically aroused. And equally so, we are so activated by social media because we are wired to make social connections. For survival in small tribes, we need to know what's going on. So we're asking basically children to go against, or even adults to go against their evolutionary survival cues, which would trigger a behavior that would allow them to survive, except now it gets triggered so much that they get into trouble. Let's experience this. In a moment, I'm going to ask you to look with your eyes to the extreme right and then to the extreme left while I make a clap. It's just like this when I do it. Are you ready to do that? Start. And how many of you are holding your breath? I think almost all of us held our breath. It's partly our defense reaction. Oops, novelty, orienting response. Remember, we are wired in our bodies as if we are prey, so we have to be vigilant. This response of eye looking left and right, what we did, we held our breath, we stiffened our body, And many of us do that without knowing, while watching screens, while working, even using Excel or other programs. We just freeze. And then we get these new stimuli to reactivate us, which I think we really forget that's going on. And really, what happens to our brain when we do it is even more interesting. Let me do one more little experiment on that, okay? Let me do it this way. I'd like you for a moment mentally to subtract the number 7 sequentially from 100. So that would be 100, 93, 86. Are you ready to do that? Do it as quickly as possible. Start, do it. Keep doing it. And now quickly take a gasp. Or hold your breath. Good enough. And what happened to your thoughts? Your thoughts stopped. So what happens when we give these reactions to the screen, our unconscious responses, unaware responses, we may hold our breath, we're staring, but we almost stop our brain. And here's an example what happens physiologically, what I just did. Here's a person, we're just asking to do mental math. They hold their breath. And what she then states is, I'm unaware that I held my breath and I had shoulder tension. I felt rushed and my brain blanked out. I couldn't do the math. On the other hand, when she could keep breathing, she could do it. So remember that another part that's useful to do is to observe what happens when you work at the computer, when you do anything. Are you holding your breath? Do you go, you don't even know we're doing it. And yet when you keep breathing and really learn slower diaphragmatic breathing, where your abdomen go in and out and let the breathing go slower, it allows our bodies to regenerate. That's a critical part. So take-home messages. If you don't remember something, blank out, breathe slowly, and focus on the exhalation. I can keep going for a little while about what happens when you mouse. I'll just show it for a moment, okay? When people work at a computer as this, you see two phenomena, or there are many more. Here's the person working. We monitor their physiology. And what do we see? When they're working, their breathing is quicker. That's this line on top, these two lines. We have measure breathing. When you inhale, the line goes up. When you exhale, the line goes down. And you can see when the person is resting with their hands on their lap, they breathe slowly. They just bring the hands to the keyboard. They're already anticipating. They breathe quicker. And then working, breathing even more quickly. They are totally unaware that happens. And then what happens in the neck and shoulders? That's the lines at the bottom here. This is the neck, the bottom one. Notice when they're working, the neck and shoulders are tense the whole time and do not relax. Without any awareness, we're working, I'm exaggerating now, we're raising our shoulders, especially when we're mousing, and we don't know it. It's that chronic tension that leads to trouble. We don't know it. So the key is that when we work at the computer, we brace. We don't know it till we come home at night and we're exhausted and tired. Let's do that by an experiential practice. And let's do this little exercise. As you're sitting, and most of you are probably sitting as you're watching this video, is just for a moment, lift your knee up, your right knee up a little bit so your foot is off the ground. So you're lifting your knee. You don't have to go very far. Just lift it up like in the center slide here. Just keep holding it. Notice you probably held your breath without knowing, but assume, let your neck be relaxed as you're doing it. It's possible. Keep lifting. And now you may even feel some achiness develop. Just relax. I know many of you could hold the leg up longer. It also depends how much I paid you for to hold your leg up in humor. But notice you felt some achiness developing. How come? The reason this occurs is because we held our muscles tight. That reduced the blood supply through the muscle by about 80%. And muscles are really evolved to tighten for a moment, relax, tighten, relax. And when we do that, we don't get achiness usually. We can perform for a long time. Because the same muscle we just used for lifting the knee up is the muscle we also use for walking. And many of you can walk 15, 20 minutes continuously or even longer. And you don't feel any achiness or tiredness because the muscle tightens, let go. It's when we hold the chronic tension. So the second key of all this is that we need to take many, many breaks at the computer because usually the ergonomics is incorrect, which lets us have static muscle tension. Or we just get so involved in the task we don't know it. And so you may want to just download this free stretch break program you can install on your computer, which you can set up so every 20 minutes it reminds you to get up, wiggle, and move. Just for a moment again. Just wiggle and move and take a big breath. Take a big breath in. And then there are many other exercises we can do. Here, just to remind ourselves about the importance which underlie tech stress, and that's the incorrect ergonomics. I already alluded to that. Remember that if the ergonomics is incorrect, whether you're the wrong chair, the screen being too low, looking down, or you're forced to look down, there's no way you have an opportunity to sit correctly. It means you will sit correctly. However, if you have the right ergonomic setup, that means you can look straight ahead, your hands can be on a keyboard over your lap, then you only have the opportunity to sit correct. It doesn't mean you still may be tense, you still may breathe shallowly. And finally, the piece I want to talk about are two components. We now live in a world where we all slouch down. We don't even know we're doing it. And when we slouch like this, we move into a more negative, or we have more easy access to hopeless, helpless thoughts. And let me just do that as a little experiment for a moment, okay? What I'd like you all to do is just slouch, just collapse down like this, look down. And while in this position, evoke only hopeless, helpless, powerless memories, one after the other. So for the next few seconds, evoke only hopeless, helpless, powerless, defeated memories. Keep looking down. Normally we do it for 30 seconds. And now, without changing your position, stay the same way, evoke only optimistic, empowering memories. So evoke only optimistic and empowering memories, one after the other. And now I'd like you to change your position. Put yourself in a more open position. Sit up, almost arch your lower back. Look slightly above the horizon. That, even your hands can be palms up on your lap. You're more open. And now in this position, looking slightly up, I'd like you to evoke only hopeless, helpless, powerless, defeated memories, one after the other. And now, without shifting your position, still looking up, evoke only empowering, optimistic memories, one after the other. I think that's enough. You can do this with your friends and colleagues. Try it. The results are overwhelming. What did you experience? As you see on the slide here, you can see that when you collapse, you have much more access to negative memories, hopeless memories. It's more difficult to access positive memories. When you're sitting erect, it's much easier to access positive memories and a more difficult accessing the negative, hopeless memories. It doesn't mean you didn't access them. What most people would report is when they were up, when they thought about the hopeless memory, helpless memory, defeated memories, they were more at a distance, they were more removed from it. And note how important it is, because how do we now sit in the world? We look at the computer, slouch down. We sit on our couch, our slouch down. Our back is like a letter C. We look at streaming videos. And definitely we look at cell phones looking down all the time. And if I think of the cell phone, if you only look up, look down, we become really unaware of the periphery around us. And look at that, since the introduction of the cell phone, we have had more pedestrian accidents. And in a humorous way, you can see it in this video clip. I'll show it one more time, this video clip, for fun. You see, we're totally oblivious to the world around us. But this posture is more critical than we think. So many of us feel a little bit more hopeless, lower energy, by just becoming aware that my computer system, I'm immobilized, I tend to slouch a bit more. It will automatically evoke that body state which we in the past was associated with more hopelessness, defeat, sadness. If that happens for you, and it's not true for everybody, then by just changing your body position, looking up, it gives the opportunity to have more easy access to positive memories. And finally, I think we can keep going for many more, and I'll skip that. But I want to point out that when we change posture, it is a critical phenomenon. And for that, we sometimes use a device called an upright go, which is a device which we put on people's spine. You can buy them commercially. I have no financial investment in a company. And you put in your spine, in your neck, and then you set it up on your cell phone, and when you now slouch, it vibrates. That reminds you to do something. And people do that when their ergonomics is incorrect. They were unaware of it. When they have hopeless thoughts, they tend to slouch. When they get tired, they slouch. When they get stressed, or when I cross my legs. And then if you use that as a cue to remind yourself to stop. Maybe I'm tired. Maybe I should go for a little walk. Maybe I'm thinking only negative, hopeless thoughts. Well, stop, take a breath. And we find it unbelievably useful, as you can see in our research data comparing to control groups, that the students and employees who do this report a significant improvement in their health compared to the control group when they practice for a number of weeks. And I love the subjective statements they would say as well, when the effect of the feedback posture is, I became aware of posture. I'm more confident, happy, productive, positive, energized, appreciative, focused, easygoing, strong. And notice the negative qualities have gone down. Now, many of us, as I started up before, report these symptoms. We can have an option. The option at the computer is to make personal choices. To one, remember, you may not breathe. Allow yourself to breathe lower. 2, sit up. 3, really wiggle and move a lot. 4, put time constraints in on use. 5, get together with your friends and family. So finally, I want to recommend one little practice we can all do, which comes from this data. The final useful practice to enhance our health is to combine breathing, posture, and even changing our thoughts. We often, when we collapse, we feel tired, we start looking more at the doom outcome, the bad things that can happen. Or when we feel stressed, we react. If I can be aware and become aware, the moment I become stressed, I do the following 3 things. 1, I change my position. I make myself more open. I look slightly up. I take another lower breath because I probably held my breath. I exhale. And then, only then, think of a more positive solution. The outcomes are remarkably different. And if I look at that, when you do the posture, the breathing, and starting to change your language, you really experience a significant decrease in negative thoughts and anxiety and tension. If you just try to only change your thoughts, it doesn't work as well. So keep that in mind. And finally, I want to summarize with an example combining these concepts to improve your health. This was a student 32 years old, who had headaches 2 or 3 times a week. That started age 15 when she started working at the computer and stuff like this. She was taking medication 2 or 3 times a week. She unloaded, kinked her neck, tensed her shoulders right on the phone. She breathed mainly her chest. And she came to class that day. The first day in class, she came up to me and said, Dr. Pepper, I may have to leave the class early or right now because I have such headache. But when I looked at her, I noticed that she was slightly slouched. She had this kinked neck, breathing shallowly in her chest. And I suggested for her to sit up, to relax her shoulders. We guided her through lower breathing, and she found her tension slightly decreased. Then during the week, her homework assignment was to really practice, with the feedback. And what she then did is she used this app or this device on her shoulders. She kept doing that every time she slouched. She would get up and move. We have another one you can do for breathing that's called Flow MD, the same way for breathing. And every time she identified situations, she would correct them. So basically what she did, as this graph would show, in the past, she was just aware of the symptoms. Here's her headache. Now she became aware that she started to slouch or felt stressed. And the moment she felt stressed, she would then use that as the cue to sit up and then to wiggle around or even take a walk sometimes. What happened after 2 weeks? Her eye strain stayed about the same. Her shoulder pain went down significantly. Her back pain literally almost disappeared. Her depression disappeared. Her anxiety went down, and she became much more motivated. We did a follow-up on her, 14-week follow-up and a 2-year follow-up, and she continued to be headache-free. So let me end by saying what we can do. 1, respect your evolutionary background. Remember, we were in a hunting and gathering society where we alternated moving, resting, looking at a far distance and nearby, and being only together with people. It's critical for social support. Re-establish more of that. 2, optimize your ergonomics. If you have an incorrect chair or ergonomic arrangement, you can only sit incorrectly and be under stress. However, if you have the correct arrangement, you have the opportunity to sit more correctly. It doesn't mean you will. I would always recommend using some biofeedback to be aware of what happens in your body, because we're so unaware that we are reacting. Just like when I did the exercise looking right and left, we were unaware we held our breath. Really observe your breathing. We live in a culture where most of us either hold our breath, breathe rapidly and shallowly. When we can breathe lower and slower, we regenerate much more easily. Turn off digital devices when socializing. When you have a dinner party or friends come over, or even at a meeting, put all the devices at the front door. Do not let them be on the table. And then, while working, block off all your notifications so you can focus on the task. And we don't have to always answer the emails 24/7. We can put an announcement in and say, I'm available for emails. I'm available for texting between 4 o'clock and 6 o'clock in the evening, or whatever time you say. It's surprising how people will respect that. And do not have any screens before going to sleep, because the blue light projected from the screen tends to suppress the melatonin in your body. And the screen content also tends to activate us, which may interfere with our health. And finally, for health promotion, to support immune competence, enhance our social connections and social support. Take time out to evoke positive, emotional, quieting practices such as meditation, prayer, whatever. And I would say eat less ultra-processed foods. Learn stress management techniques, not just what you can do for 20 minutes, but once you carry out through the day. And then go outside, explore the trees, look at the roofs, at the treetops, look up. Because when you look up, you put your body in a position which is more optimistic. Thank you so much.